The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is sponsored by Two Fat Lardies, Geek Nation Tours, and also by donations of you, the listener. Thank you to everyone for your most generous support. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast, episode 198, Tiny Terrain Models, with hosts Neil Shuck, Mike Hobbs, Mike Whitaker and Dave Luff, and guest Craig Thompson from Tiny Terrain Models. Hello and welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. I am Neil Shuck, and once again I am joined by the Welsh wizard himself, Mr. Michael Hobbs.
Hello all, hello.
Hello and happy St. David's Day, sir.
Thank you. There is much Dollymut in the valleys today.
Indeed, I mean...
How did you do on Saturday?
Yeah, moving on.
I did think that the Welsh cakes were a bit of a day early preemptive strike.
Wow, blame my wife for that.
But they are really nice.
They're lovely.
Hang on,
they are one of my more favourite things.
Excuse me, Mr. Whitaker, how do you know that Mr. Hobbs's Welsh cakes? Or
They're
Mr.
cakes. They're my department. I need to know these things.
I've sent him some.
This is kind of what I was thinking. There is a conspiracy going on behind my back. Mr. Whitaker.
No, what's right in front of you?
Yeah,
it's Mike Whitaker. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Who insists on getting on the podcast even before I've introduced him.
You mentioned cakes.
Yes. It's a rule.
All bets are off at that point.
Yep.
Indeed. Welcome both. During this evening's interview, we will also be joined by the Luffmeister, but he's not on this part of the show. Yeah, so on this evening's show, we will be catching up with what we've been getting up to in the last week. Loads of different bits and pieces going on there. In the main part of the show, we will have an interview for you with Craig Thompson, otherwise known as Tiny Terrain Models, and we'll be chatting to him all about his growing range of miniatures.
Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and talk about what we've been up to this week.
I don't like it, Sergeant.
Me neither, sir.
Good Lord, it's really looking pretty bad.
Yes, sir. It happens every time, sir. It's too predictable, sir.
How far do you think we've advanced, Sergeant?
6 inches, sir. It's always 6 inches. We advance 6 inches, then Jerry gets a go. The lads are calling it Hi-Go, You-Go, sir.
Hi-Go, You-Go? Good grief.
And they don't like it, sir.
Oh, not like it? Seems pretty straightforward to me, rather like cricket. We have an innings, then the other chap does.
Well, that's all very well, sir, with cricket, sir, but begging your pardon, it ain't like that, sir, in war. I don't think Mr. Hitler plays like that.
What, Hitler? No, gosh, he'd like to go all the time.
Oh, Lord, sir, lummy. Oh, well, sir, anyway, sir, it's like this, sir. If it carries on like this, Hi-Go, You-Go, me and the lads won't be coming to your Thursday evening games club, and that's the way it is, sir.
Looking for more of a challenge with your World War II games? Are you tired of the predictability of I-Go, You-Go systems? I ain't been shot, mum. provides real command challenges on an unpredictable battlefield. Two fat lardies, playing the period and not the rules since 2002. Pip pip.
What have we been playing? What have we been buying? We might even have painted something. The Meeples and Miniatures crew reveal all. And welcome back, and we're at the part of the show where we find out what we've been up to in the last week. Mr. Hobbs, what have you been up to, mate?
Nothing.
I'm sorry, hang on, that's nothing for 2 weeks running.
Yeah, no, it's not good, is it? I haven't picked up a paintbrush. Haven't had a game. Only thing I've done this week is stick lots and lots of stickers onto lots and lots of blocks.
Well, it has to be said, especially considering the amount of wooden blocks and the amount of stickers you currently have, that's probably took up most of your week.
Yeah, I mean, we could spin it and say, I've completed the Russian army.
Only the Russians?
To 1815, plus the Austrian army for 1808 to 1815, and loads of French. The French Grand Army has been completed. I've done all of this in a week. Yeah,
it does sound really good when you put it like that, isn't it? It's like,
yeah,
yeah.
There's a lot of blocks.
There's a lot of, oh yeah, yeah, and
there's an awful lot of blocks.
It's kind of self-inflicted, though.
Well, self-inflicted by the fact that I bought them. Yeah, I suppose. But
you must admit, you do kind of get to the point with CNC Napoleonics, so turning around and going, seriously? Why are you still giving me 4 more French units? Do I not have enough already?
I think I've worked it out. I think they work all the scenarios out, just taking the core box and the expansion. So they don't.
Ah, right, okay. Yes.
They don't assume that you bought the other expansions. They only do that in the epic one.
Yeah, actually, that is incredibly sensible and the sort of thing that I wish I'd thought of just before I uttered that question.
But other than that, no, I've been doing nothing at all. I know, terrible. But this week, I got a game booked for tomorrow with Jeff and somebody else. I'm not sure who. And then on Saturday,
hello, Jeff.
Hey, Jeff. And then
Hello,
Saturday, I'm
Jeff.
going to have a game of Over the Hills.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, we're gonna give that a go. Me and my mate Mark. But that's it.
Oh, wow, okay. That's an incredibly quiet week for you. Well, okay, one other question. Have you bought anything?
No.
What? I'm
know.
I'm sorry.
Nothing at all.
Is this really Hobbsy?
Yeah.
I don't feel well.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
Oh, I just remembered I did buy something.
I suppose it's one of those things of, it just depends. It's that one thing in the many that you may have, absent-mindedly forgotten. Go on, what did you buy?
I bought some French artillery for my Sharp Practice 2 Peninsular War Army. So I picked up the Victrix French artillery.
Oh, the plastic box set. Cool.
Yeah, it's not a box set. It's in a bag with a label.
Oh, right, okay.
And I bought the Stormtrooper.
Which is odd, because the British one's in a box.
Yeah.
I know this because there's one sitting just there.
I know it too because I bought one and it's gone now. No, it's in like a plastic bag because I think it's the size of the frame. They must be using bigger plastic frames and it won't fit in boxes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So how many did you get? Do you get? Because in the British box you get 3. I mean, you get 3 guns, do you?
Yeah, 3 guns and 3 crew.
Oh, cool.
I've been opened it, yeah. And I bought the Imperial Assault Stormtrooper on the dewback.
On the dewback.
Yeah,
dewback. Yeah.
Brought it down as well.
Ooh, Imperial Assault.
I have bought something. I might have to get another one of those because you got a choice of stormtroopers. You either have the commander one or you can have like a normal one.
Oh, right, so you got to buy another one so you can have one of each.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it works, isn't it?
Oh, well, yeah, normally, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I've still yet to play Imperial Assault. Mr. Hickman, I know you're listening. I need to have a game of that. It's on my list. Hopefully in the next few weeks.
Lovely. So there you go. All done. Over to you, Mike.
Me? Oh, right. So, game-wise, have a game if I ain't been shot on Monday, as anybody following me on Twitter will have noticed.
Look very nice.
Back to Normandy.
Those Shermans and Stugs got very close to each other.
Yeah, that's because there was a whopping great smoke screen between them.
We did notice.
The British, as run by Carl, Carl is very fond of his 2-inch mortars.
Oh.
It's kind of in the drill manual, really. You kind of have to. And there was a really dense cloud of 2-inch mortar smoke there, and lots of things running up to the smoke, peering through it, and reversing back out again. And due to the way the rules work in Battle for Liberation for smoke, you put a dice by the smoke that starts on a 3, and every time you don't feed the smoke with another mortar round, the dice drops by 1, and on 0 it dissipates. And due to some interesting timings of tea break cards, the British mortar sections didn't have... Carl had other uses for his activations, and the British mortar sections didn't get to fire. And so suddenly smoke dissipates, and everybody goes, "Ooh, there you are." and then both lots of British Shermans got to activate before the Stugs.
Oh, nice.
Or, for that matter, the Panzerfaust that was sitting behind the hedge. So... But that was Normandy rather than Italy, but it's the Road to St. Leger scenario, which is in the first of the battle games that vanished when your digital subscription died. To which, thank you for somebody on the Shotgun group on Facebook for finding me a copy. Although, I have legitimate title to it, but couldn't find my copy because I stupidly forgot to download it as a PDF at the time. Interesting scenario, largely because there's no bocage, there's only about half a dozen bits of hedge, and you spend most of your time actually going hull down behind ridge lines, and there is in fact no hard cover on the table.
Oh, right, okay.
So, made for an interesting little game. Tom, who took the Germans, if he'd been a little bit luckier with his activations and his dice, might have edged it. He took out one Sherman with the first shot. He could have had one of the 2 Fireflies, and I think, as he said, if we fought it again, he thinks he might be able to win it. It's an interesting little scenario. It was good fun. That's pretty much it for the doing. No buying, but I had a Kickstarter arrive.
Oh yeah.
Which one?
That one, Thud.
It's about a 15-inch long resin frigate.
Oh, Blood and Plunder.
Oh, yeah. It is awesome. Basically, there is you can't see this, but that Thud was largely the box with the resin body in it, which is, as I said, is 15 inches long, about 4 inches wide, solid resin. And then you get a collection of odd dowels for masts and cross yards. And then there's a little jiffy bag which contains some rigging wire, some cannons, and other assorted bits, and hopefully some clue on how it all goes together. So that arrived today. That arrived day before yesterday, which did, I have to say, look rather fine. It's going to take a bit of painting. That amount of white resin.
What you want is like an airbrush, and somebody who can show you how to use it.
Yeah, I'm sure we could find one of those somewhere. Other than that, Clubs I Ain't Been Shotgun campaign proper, which is 29 Let's Go Large, starts next week. Which means that sometime over the weekend I have to paint 2 sections of Germans and possibly an engineer platoon. Just in case the Americans decide they want one.
I know where the Let's Go Large comes from because it's in one of the specials, isn't it? But it's just
it's
29, 29 Let's Go. Do you want fries with that? Yeah.
It's 29 Let's Go Mad in Dorset, isn't it?
Yes.
But yeah, it looks quite a fun little scenario. And as I said, I had most of the stuff already painted up for it, barring I'm going to bring my German company up to full strength, and I suspect they may want some engineers. So there's a box. Yeah, those in fact, little box of American engineers to paint up. Shouldn't be too hard. Americans are nice.
Okay, are they Battlefront?
Of course they are.
Yeah, the Battlefront US Engineer box was quite nice. I must admit, I was contemplating getting those for my for my cock army.
It's the Engineer Combat Platoon Late.
Yes.
US 736 for those who really care. A princely £6.50 off eBay.
Yes, I was very tempted by those a while ago. In fact, I think they might still be on my shopping list.
Well, they're kind of an essential ingredient for any serious scenario, because at some point you're going to want to move minefields.
Well, yeah, there is that.
So yeah, I can't think of anything else. That's pretty much me, I think. So, Mr. Shuck, what have you been up to?
I've had a bit of a busy week, as if you've been reading the blog or follow me on Twitter, whatever, you may have realised. Okay, so first off, gaming. It was a board game week this week. We currently alternate between board games and war games, so 3 of us got together. Because Mr. Hickman, hello Mr. Hickman, who he now assures me he's caught up with the podcast. Isn't it a bit scary when a guy you work with is listening to the podcast?
As long as it's not your manager, you're okay.
Well, this is it. Me and Dave have worked together for a long time. So he assured me this week that he has caught up with the podcast. So hello, Mr. Hickman. He went to Firestorm Games last week. So he's in the rather annoying position of actually getting to Firestorm Games before I do. Anyway, he took a quick break and he was in Cardiff. And amongst other things, he bought Reign of Cthulhu, which is the Cthulhu-themed pandemic game, which I played at Telford last year. It was the one, that was the one bright spark in an otherwise very dull and empty day. But anyway, so we played that again on Thursday night. We played that as a 3-player game. We played it on easy, and we won, which is always good for a beginner. I mean, it was starting to get to be a bit of a close run thing. If we were going to lose on the next turn if we didn't complete it, but we kind of sorted it. Nothing untoward happened. We got it done, but it was starting to get a bit tight. But it's a very nice implementation of the game. I suspect it is slightly easier than normal Pandemic, although I am open for suggestions to the contrary. But it's lovely theme, lots of nice bits. Yeah, great. So that's Pandemic Reign of Cthulhu. And we finished off the evening by getting an old game out, Dominion. If you remember Dominion, which is it almost goes as far as to be one of the original deck building games. Because I mean, deck building has become such a staple of board games in recent years that people may forget that before Dominion, it was something that was kind of limited to CCGs to a great extent. But yeah, we had a game of Dominion.
I don't know. Is it really a deck building game? It's sort of a which expansions do I feel like buying, followed by which of those do I feel like including in the game, which I'm not sure is quite what most people mean by deck building, is it?
No, the mechanic of the game is deck building.
Yeah, true. Fair.
You have to build your deck in order to play the game. So that's what I was getting at by a deck building game, as opposed to a deck building meta.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yes. So, and again, it's one of those things. I mean, I think I played it once last year with Josh, and before then, it's been like 5 years since I played it. Primarily because when it first came out, Dave bought it and played it to death and got fed up with it. And then we were playing it last week, and he kind of went, "Oh yeah, it's a good game, isn't it?" But we were introducing it to a new player, and that always makes a difference. But no, so that was good. So that's that's pretty much what I've been gaming. Okay, confession time. I hinted last week that I'd been buying some stuff, but it hadn't arrived yet, so it didn't count. Well, some of it has arrived. So I do have one confession. Now, there are some things that arrive which I won't talk about yet because there are plans afoot, and hopefully that they will come to fruition in the next couple of weeks, and you will see what I've been buying. However, I do have one confession to make. Do you remember on the J. Arnold show? And it's actually not in the bit that we recorded, but it's actually in the interview that we did with J. Arnold. The interview that Jay did with us, should I say, that's on episode 8 of The Veteran Wargamer.
That kind of depends on your definition of with, really, doesn't it?
Well, it does, yeah, but, yes, when we talked at Jay for a while. But he did ask us one question, which was, what would it take for us to go back to GW? And
oh yeah,
do you remember that? Yeah. And I said
something like never.
And I said, I said, been there, done that, never.
Yeah, I'd never go back. Said Neil. Yeah. Never. You said.
Never, ever, never. No, been there, done that.
Yeah.
Well, do you remember Mr. Jones? Mr. Rich Jones.
Mr. Rich Jones, pusher of all things GW these days.
Pusher of all, indeed. And oh, by the way, yes, Mr. Jones, happy birthday. Yes.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yes. A few weeks ago, he blogged about a new game that GW had brought out called Gangs of I still don't know quite how to pronounce it. Is it Kamora? Whatever. Anyway, basically, it's a game set in the Dark Eldar homeworld, and you have jet bikes and Hellions. These guys riding these skimmer things that look a bit like the flyer that the Green Goblin uses, for want of a better phrase. Although I'm sure there was no IP overlap intended. But it's basically a little gang warfare game using jet bikes and these. And I thought, oh, that looks interesting. And I did really like Necromunda back in the day. It was one of my favourite games back in the day. Did I mention I actually had 2 painted Necromunda gangs? 2! Yeah. Anyway, so that arrived. that arrived this week. Funny enough, it's. I was looking at one of the resellers because I was looking to get it, pick it up for a decent price, and it's getting out of stock in quite a few places actually. So it would seem to be it's quite popular. Now, okay, I'm looking at it sat here, or at least I'm looking at the box it's in because it hasn't come out the box. But that has arrived, and I will be opening it in due course. Although, after the realization this week, I'm going to have to be very good about that. Okay. Other than that, I've had a couple of other boxes arrive. All I will say is that they contain scenery, and you'll see what I'm planning in the next, hopefully the next couple of 2 or 3 weeks once I get my act together. Things happening, and I bought a GW game, which I probably won't hear the last of, but there you go. That was my buy. I don't think I bought anything else this week. Pledge Manager for Deep Madness has opened.
Oh, Pledge Manager for Star Saga I signed off on this week as well. I forgot that.
Deep Madness, if you haven't seen it, that was a Kickstarter that came out last year, which was kind of, I described it on the blog as The Abyss meets Half-Life meets, I think it was Event Horizon, with added Lovecraft. It's kind of a sci-fi horror board game that takes place on a deep-sea mining rig. And you basically play a team of investigators. Cooperative game, but with some seriously nice models. The Pledge Manager opened last week, I think it was. They are allowing late pledges, and the other thing they're actually doing is that they're putting stretch goals on the late pledges. So if more people pledge, and they get so many people ordering a particular expansion or something, they're giving you more free stuff. So we've got two new free models out of it as it is, which is something quite interesting. But anyway, that's in passing. I've got to sign off on that. But one other thing I did this week, which I think I just kind of mentioned last week, I'm going on this weekend. I did an airbrush course. Now, this was a Christmas and birthday present this year. People may know I actually turned 50 this year. My good lady was wondering what I wanted for a 50th birthday present, since I didn't want a party. I know, And she was asking what I wanted, and I was having a look round, and funny enough, I was chatting to Rich Halford at work. Hi, Rich, who's another member of our gaming group now. And he was talking about this company in Barwell, and they were doing some courses. And the name rang a bell because I've seen them around the shows. If you've been around the UK show circuit for the last couple of years, you may well have seen Barwell UK Airbrush Supplies. They might also be known as Barwell Body Shop, depending on which banners they got with them. But they do airbrush courses. I am a complete novice. Other than a 30-second demonstration, I've never picked up an airbrush in my life. But you kind of look at what people do with airbrushes, and especially when you start, painting camouflage patterns and various other bits and pieces, and you're looking at your Halo Covenant fleet, which is still unpainted, and thinking, I could do some really nice stuff with that with an airbrush. And you think, well, maybe it's worth having a look and seeing what it's like, and actually seeing if it's something I could do. So I did a 2-day airbrush course, and it was brilliant, absolutely fantastic. I would highly recommend it. Steve at Barwell Bodyworks is great guy, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly talented airbrusher. Yeah, so you go from stage 1 of this is how an airbrush works, and you spend Saturday morning drawing lines and circles and realising the fact that actually drawing a straight line with an airbrush is a little more difficult than what it is. But by the end of the weekend, I was painting some of my own models, and yeah, it was great. Really, really good. Hugely enjoyable. Learned an awful lot. And so now I have a rather large shopping list. Because it's like, well, that was really great. So now I've got to go out and buy an airbrush.
I have an airbrush. I just don't have an air source for it.
Ah, right, okay. Yes.
And I'm loath to just go on canned air, so at some point I will have to treat myself to a compressor, which probably means I also ought to treat myself to a spray booth, which means I ought to tidy out the workshop to the point where I can use it.
Yeah. You don't necessarily, heresy, you don't necessarily need a spray booth. We certainly were working without them for most of the weekend. The only time we ever used a spray booth was when we were priming. And that was primarily because the Badger primers we were using are a little bit smelly. But the standard paints we were using were odorless, and we were spraying just over a table with a couple of pieces of paper down. Perfectly fine. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I really had my eyes open to, well, what it can do. I've always had this idea that airbrushing is really complicated because keeping an airbrush clean and everything is a real pain in the backside. And actually, it's not so bad. Yeah, there's a couple of golden rules you have to follow, but keeping an airbrush clean and running and everything, actually, it's a lot less complicated than what I thought it was. And again, half of it's down to what paints you use. So, of course, the other issue then becomes the fact that it might get expensive because obviously you can use existing paints and thin them, but it might actually end up being a lot easier to buy specific airbrush paints. And the ones we were using at the weekend, which are I think it's the Badger Mini Tear range, were really, really nice.
Yeah. I think that's key, is using the right paints for them. Cause probably get with just watering down normal paint, is the pigment just starts to separate out a bit too much. Yeah, and ends up being a wash rather than a thin paint, doesn't it?
That's it. Yeah. That's it. So I got a really good insight into what an airbrush can do, but also from my way of thinking, what an airbrush can't do, or at least what an airbrush can't do in my particular, in my hands. So, it's like what you would use an airbrush for, but also what you'd still use traditional brushwork for.
Yeah.
But actually, the combination between the two, you could certainly see how it could massively speed up painting, and you could, it is fair to say there are things you can do with an airbrush that you simply cannot do with other things. I mean, the blending you can do with an airbrush, unless you're a really, really good brush painter, you can't do what you can do with an airbrush. And I'm not that good a brush painter. But, so there's effects that you can do with an airbrush that you just cannot, do with the same skill level with a brush. So it does open a completely new, it's a completely new toolbox. So I'm actually quite excited, but of course it does mean then it's like, oh right, so I've got to do this, and so I need to do this as opposed to spending on models. It's like...
That's the thing with it, isn't it? I mean, I've had an airbrush for about 12 years or so. And
Really?
I used to use it a lot I used to paint my GHQ Germans with an airbrush.
Oh, right, okay.
But I was just using canned air.
Yeah.
I haven't used it for a while now, and I think I sort of look at the price of getting a compressor, and also I need to get a brand new airbrush anyway, and the paint. And I just think, for what I'd use it for, does it justify it? I don't paint that many tanks or vehicles, so is it worth spending? What we're looking at, about 300 quid for a good airbrush plus a compressor.
Before paint, I costed this out this week to be about 200 quid.
Yeah.
Just over, right, and that's before paint. So that's a compressor, and that's the compressor. So that's one of these, not one of these, 300 quid compressors. This is one of the cheaper Chinese ones, but it's one with but it is one with a tank on. Okay, now they work out about 75 pence. Okay, and normally with those you get a free airbrush with them anyway. Now, I mean the airbrushes are pretty, not great, to say the least, but it's a start. But they work out so that works out about £75. Then you've got all your extra bits and pieces, your cleaning pot and possibly an airbrush stand, although a lot of those is 2-in-1. I was looking at airbrush cleaner, thinners, maybe some flow aid, then making sure you've got a cleaning kit, and make sure you've got some lubricant. I mean, again, a lot of this isn't expensive. It's like the lubricant's like £4. I'm looking at the large 200ml bottles of thinners and stuff, and they work out to be about a tenner, and you only use bits and pieces. Get a few.
The worrying thing with that is, of course, it all slowly mounts up in little 10 quid lumps, doesn't it?
Well, this is it, and it's like, and then it's like, let's get a set of different size bottles so you can decant stuff in, plastic bottles so you can decant stuff into and what have you. And by the time you've done that, you spent 10 quid on plastic bottles.
Yeah.
Before you bought a decent airbrush, that's just the compressor and all the other bits. I reckon you're talking about somewhere between 130 and 140 pound.
Yeah. Okay.
And then to get decent results, you've got to get a decent airbrush. We were working with Badger airbrushes at the weekend, funny enough, because Boyle Body Works is a supplier of Badger. Well, I think there are only two others, but they're a main supplier in the UK of Badger airbrushes, which are really nice. And we asked Steve what he'd recommend, and he'd recommend a Patriot 105 airbrush, which is about 80 quid. And that's a decent, that's a good finish, decent starting airbrush. But yeah, so basically you're looking about £220 ish before you start buying paint.
Yeah, like I say, I'd love to have one, because I know the effects you can get with them are great, and they can speed up painting so much. But it's got to be for specific things, and I sort of look at what I'm painting at the moment, or what I've been painting over the last few years. Probably the only things I'd use it for would be my Planetfall stuff, and Armada, and I just sort of think, would it just be 200 quid that I could spend on other things? It's difficult to justify it, even though I know the effect, what you can do with it, and how good you can the sort of stuff you can do with it.
It's your recipe of choice for things like P-dot camouflage and weird shit like that. And actually, for German AFV camouflage generally, it's one of the nicer ways of doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very much. Yeah, very much so. And obviously, I've just started consuming YouTube videos on airbrushing at a great rate of knots, looking at various ideas and other bits and pieces. Yeah, looking at stuff. And funnily enough, they would be an ideal tool for spraying, I don't know, jet bike canopies.
Perfect for that, mate, yeah.
Why would you ever want to do that?
I've no idea. I mean, some of the models they were playing with was, they were playing with we had a couple of old Aldar grav tanks, and we were looking at using flexible stencils and just some of the effects you can get, and it was like, that's really cool. And this is the point where you're starting to make me regret the fact that I sold my Aldar army on eBay about 4 years ago.
Yeah, and that's it, isn't it? It's what you paint. I mean, if I was selling at 40k and doing Eldar or Dark Eldar or something like that, then yeah, I'd jump at it. If I was starting my Planet 4 stuff again, I'd probably get one. But yeah.
I've got a lot of 28mm stuff that I could paint, and funny, stupidly enough, I was looking at Train Tutor guy. Mel the Train Tutor on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, check it out. He's brilliant.
We need to get him on the show.
That would be good.
But
He's brilliant.
He may suffer a bit from the usual disease of some of our guests have never stopped talking.
And he was talking about using airbrushing for terrain and looking at, basically how can you work it to put house paint through an airbrush. And, the weird and wonderful ways you can do it, so you can actually use an airbrush for painting terrain as opposed to just, using model paint, because obviously painting terrain with model paint is massively expensive. There's all different things like that. So, and looking at what I've got and my collection of stuff, I was saying, well, I do have an awful lot of use for it, but it's obviously, it's just the initial, as you say, it's the initial outlay. But once you've got over that hump of, well, hang on a second, I could buy myself 2 or 3, it's like, well, if we 15mm, for example, 200 quid buys you 2 or 3 sharp practice armies. But even in 28mm.
Or one professionally painted one.
Or one, yeah, indeed. It's a big investment. It is that question of, okay, how much would you use it? Would you use it to paint 28 mm models? Well, certainly certainly priming and base coating, for sure. And it's so much easier to use than a spray can. And I mean, at the moment, I brush paint all my primings. I don't spray paint, I brush paint. And yes, spray painting does give a nicer finish. And we were playing with it the weekend, and it's like, yeah, that is fantastic. You can prime a 15mm Sherman in 10 seconds. It's great. There is a lot I could use it for, but again, part of that I suppose is because looking at my model collection, there's an awful lot of stuff that I've still to paint, which is probably where I differ from you, Hobbsy.
Here's a question for you: if you bought the compressor, which comes with a cheap airbrush, and you bought yourself a nice, £80, £200, £120 decent airbrush, and you're willing to do terrain, why wouldn't you just use the cheap airbrush? Because if you're doing terrain, you're doing big areas, and using a cheap airbrush, you wouldn't get the fine finish as you would with a decent airbrush. It's like having 2 brushes. You got your double O for doing fine detail, and you've got a great big wodgy 2-inch one for doing terrain.
And that is exactly the reason for buying 2 airbrushes. Because at the same time, I understand, the airbrushes that come with the compressors are okay as far as they go. It's like with anything, you get what you pay for. So they're at the cheaper end of the airbrush market. And so I would buy an 80 odd quid airbrush if I was wanting to paint my Covenant fleet for Halo fleet battles, for example. I've got several ideas that I want to use, but I'm pretty sure that they would only come off if I use an airbrush. So yes, I would buy a decent airbrush to do that, I buy a decent airbrush to paint my 28mm sci-fi vehicles, including all the tanks I discovered that I had this week that I'd forgotten I bought when I was searching for models to paint.
Oh dear, what have you found?
Well, no, it was one of those things that I was just looking for models to paint, and I was going through a couple of boxes. I had a couple of box files, and I opened one up, and it was like, oh right, yeah, they're my pig iron tanks. A few years ago now, I bought some of resin tanks that pig iron do, and I was looking through. I was like, okay, yeah, so I got one of those and one of those. Hang on a second, where's the turret? And why have I got two of the APC extra bags of stuff when I've only got 2 vehicles? And then I opened the box underneath it and went, oh yeah, I remember now, I bought 4. Oops. Tell you one thing, those pig iron resin tanks are gorgeous. They are. I'd say they've been packed away in a box for a while, but they are absolutely gorgeous. Really sharp castings and great. Oh yeah. Oh, definitely check them out. So yeah, for things like that, I definitely use a decent airbrush. But for painting terrain, yeah, cheap airbrush. That's all you need. So yeah, I agree with you. That's also why I'm going to doing it in 2 stages. I'll do the initial setup with a cheap airbrush, and then probably use that for doing priming and what have you, and then a couple of months down the line buy buy a decent one. Because let's face it, I'm spending too much money on Kickstarters at the moment. So one has to budget for these things.
Indeed.
Funny enough, when I talked about I was going on this course, friend of the show, Robin Fitton, we've had Robin on a couple of times to talk about grunts and also talk about Imperial Skies. Robin does a lot of stuff on YouTube, and he does a lot of stuff about and front of airbrushing. So I had a quick conversation with him a while ago, and said, "Do you want to come? Do you want to come on the show, and we'll talk all about it from a novice and an expert point of view?" So I think it's a subject we will revisit in the non too distant future.
That'd be good.
In our copious free time.
Well, yeah, once Salute's out the way, once the UK Games Expo is out the way, then, we've got to think about what we're going to talk about.
It'll be the autumn, Robin, if you listen to this.
Maybe next year.
Well, that was me.
Yeah.
Short and sweet.
Should we do Dave whilst he's not here? I didn't buy anything. I didn't buy anything.
Oh, I don't know, mate. What did we do?
Yeah, what do we do? He's going to kill us.
Yes, we are so dead. Sorry, lovely. We love you, really.
I haven't bought anything.
Dilutes the hobby.
Of course, and the last thing is of course, I had an epiphany this week. No, not so much an epiphany as a moment of realization where if life was a movie, the Alfred Hitchcock Psycho music will be playing in the background. As I suddenly realised it's only 15 weeks to Market Laden. Yeah, something like that.
and I have no idea what game I'm running.
Yeah, we've kind of just talked about it in theory. We haven't actually sat down and worked it all out yet. And I have and especially after Mr. Luff's confession on the forthcoming interview, I suspect I will need to make an awful lot of terrain in the next few weeks.
Terrible. I've got to make a half track.
Well, this is what comes of having an already painted large model collection.
It does help.
It does help.
I'm
indeed.
thinking it might be I ain't been shot by Italy, just because I need to keep scratching that itch. But I'll need some 6-inch anti-tank guns.
So, should we get Craig on?
Indeed. Yeah, let's get Craig on. So we'll take a break.
Yeah, let's.
Yeah, when we come back, we'll be chatting with Craig Thompson from Tiny Terrain Models. This is a message from Dean Clark. Shout out to my mate, Chris Fitzpatrick, and his wife Felicity of Crocodile Games. A great place for your Greek and Egyptian mythological gaming needs. If you want to learn more about shoutouts, visit our Patreon page. The link is on the website. We hope that you're enjoying this episode of the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you are, would you like to support us? There's a couple of ways of doing so. You can become a patron of the show by supporting us on our Patreon page. There you can give regularly every time we produce a show. Alternatively, you may want to give a one-off donation, and you can do that by using PayPal. For more details on both these options, please click on the Donate tab on our website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. Have you ever wondered what's going on in wargaming? We do too. So come with us as we go behind the hobby with the Meeples and Miniatures interview. We're very pleased to welcome to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast Craig Thompson from Tiny Terrain Models. Hello, Craig.
Hi, Neil.
How you doing? You alright?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, well, thank you. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks for inviting me.
Craig is, as I say, the person behind Tiny Terrain Models, who you may or may not have heard of, but, well, accurate to say small but getting bigger quite quickly.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to describe us. Aspirations of grandeur, I think they call it.
Good stuff. Well, we'll find out all about what you're up to very shortly. But as you know, because Craig is a podcast listener, well, he's partially aware of what he's let himself in for. But Craig, as you know, the first thing we ask and new guests on the show is quite simply this: how did you get into gaming in the first place?
Do you know what? I think I'm pretty much the same as everybody else. I started off as a kid on my bedroom floor with 1/72 Airfix models. I had everything from German Paras to Napoleonics, and frequently used to pitch them against each other and roll marbles at them, and do all the usual things kids do.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky. I had a still independent toy store just in the next town to me, and they obviously had quite a strong role-playing game and board game fraternity somehow. I mean, this is in rural Oxfordshire, so I don't know quite how, but they had quite a strong following. And over probably 2 or 3 years, aged 9 to 11 or 12, I tried out all sorts of things. I used to go in there every week with my pocket money and buy some more soldiers or buy some more scenery. And I kind of went from kids' Airfix toys, and the next thing I went into was Car Wars.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I played that with my friends and thought that was great. And then the next thing, this little independent shop bought in this book of rules which I'd never seen before, which was Challenger 2. And I must have been all of about 13 at this point. Picked them up because I think it was about how much money I had in my pocket. Got home and then sat there for the next 3 weeks scratching my head because it was nothing but tables and I didn't understand a thing that it was talking about.
Right.
But nonetheless, set up all my Airfix toys and made out to my friends I knew exactly what I was doing and fluffed my way through a few games with them. And then kind of gaming in terms of miniatures just came to a natural natural end, and we kind of moved over to RPGs, and we went through probably 2 or 3 years of playing Traveller, Cthulhu, Twilight 2000, D&D, a whole range of RPGs.
Yeah.
And we didn't really touch war games at all. And then I got to 15 or 16, and the usual thing happened. I met women and drink, and then left it all alone for about 20 years.
So what brought you back into it then?
I always enjoyed the modelling side of things, and I wanted to do some modelling just as a break, really, from work. I work in sales and marketing, and I was just looking for something completely different to do of an evening. And I picked up some of the mongrel miniatures, Argentine and British Falkland stuff.
They were nice, weren't they?
They were really nice, and I made a few buildings and bits and pieces to go with them. And that was probably, 10 or 12 years ago.
Yeah, something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, and from there, I kind of refound my love of miniatures, and at the time, I was living in Bristol, and I was lucky. Portbury Knights, the club, were on my doorstep. And I literally went down there one Friday night and said, do you know what? I haven't played a game in 20 years. What are you playing? And they were playing Rules of Engagement. And I then spent probably 5 or 6 years with them playing Rules of Engagement, Blitzkrieg Commander, PBI by Peter Pig, all sorts of games. And just really had 5 or 6 years of really getting back into gaming.
Mm-hmm.
And all the time I was doing that, I was making more terrain. People were seeing me making the terrain and saying, "Oh, I see you've made a church for 15 mil. Could you make me one?" And I, make one for somebody at the club, and they'd give me 20 or 30 quid, and it just kind of roller coasted from there. And I ended up spending pretty much all my spare time making terrain for people, just on word of mouth, to the point where I actually got sick and tired of making the same things over and over. And I was it's almost an embarrassment of riches. I didn't have enough time to make everything, and I wasn't really enjoying it any longer because I had deadlines to meet. And it's one thing to make a church once, but when you're making it for the 5th or 6th time and it's got to be finished by Tuesday, the fun kind of goes out of it. And so I stopped making terrain largely, other than for myself. But along the way, I'd gathered all these people and all these different scales and all these different systems and rule books along the way. So I'm now in a nice position where I've got lots of terrain in different scales that I've built. I've got lots of different rule sets for different scales and different periods. And quite frankly, I play what I want when I want in whatever scale I want with my own terrain, which is quite a nice position to be in.
Cool. It sounds like we need to get you back on to talk about making terrain then.
I was very lucky. One of the guys at Portbury Knights was a professional model maker, and he taught me a lot. But yeah, that's making terrain is my, if you like, my strongest suit. Is what I enjoy the most. I love the fact that you can take some sticky back plastic and half a dozen egg boxes and turn it into something that with a bit of TLC looks really good on a games table and hasn't necessarily got to cost you an arm and a leg.
Amen to that. I mean, so that's something we've been discovering, isn't it, Dave?
Oh, yes. Get the terrain sorted and you're well away. Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
It might be time to resurrect the almost legendary terrain show that never happened.
It's on the list. On the list, right?
So while we've got, kind of one question here. While we've got a professional on the show,
go on,
doing roads, did it drive you around the twist as much as it did me? Because Neil berates me still to this day about me going around the twist because he had me doing roads for about 3 weeks solid.
Yeah, there are some things, roads, hedges, walls, anything monotonous. Yeah, they absolutely drive you up the wall.
There you go.
I'm halfway through rebuilding my 15mm Normandy table, and yeah, if I see another piece of bocage, I'm going to scream.
Well, there you go, Neil. It's come straight from the horse's mouth there. I don't want to get any more stick in future about roads.
Oh, just because you sat there crying into your paint because don't make me dry bush another road, please don't.
And this is why you should do North Africa. It's easy. No hedges, there's no roads. You may have to do a wadi.
Yeah, make a sand table. So much easier. Right, okay. Yes, well, okay. Getting back on track, shall we? But yeah, certainly, Craig, in that case then, let's book a space in your diary and you can come back on and we'll talk all about terrain. Sounds right. Right, okay.
Yeah,
brilliant. Right. But as you say, we diverge just a little bit. Okay, so you've been making terrain. You've been making terrain to the point where you got completely fed up with it. So, at what point did you decide that you were going to start sculpting?
Well, this was the thing. I got chatting to a guy on the Pendraken forum because I was doing a lot of 10 mil stuff. And this guy I just knew as Techno. That was his handle on their forum. Turned out Techno was a guy called Phil Lewis, who I later found out was at Games Workshop for many years as photographer, sculptor, studio manager, and 101 other things. And I was playing 10 mil games, and there were some models that I didn't have that I wanted for my own rules that I was developing. And Phil was doing a lot of sculpting for Pendraken. And I said to Phil, could you sculpt me some knights and some Nafferton throwers and a few other bits and pieces? And he said, yeah, sure. So he did them for me for a small fee, and Leon at Pendraken cast them up for me. And I thought, well, that was easy. It took about 6 or 8 weeks. I got exactly what I wanted. It was nowhere near as expensive as I thought it was going to be. And I thought, well, if I could sculpt, that would cut the cost down even more. So I had a try at sculpting myself, and quite frankly, it was a disaster. It would appear that I'm much better at terrain than I am sculpting 10 or 15 mil miniatures. So I then went back to Phil and said, look, Phil, how about doing some more sculpting for me? I don't want to compete with the guys at Pendraken in 10 mil, but there's some 28 mil stuff I'm really interested in doing, some modern miniatures which aren't on the market. Is that something you've ever done or would be interested in doing? And Phil said to me, well, I've not really done 28 mil modern. I've done lots of 28 mil fantasy. But yeah, sure, I'd love to give it a go. And this was about 12 months ago. Phil sculpted our first pack, which was a Special Forces medic with a guy on a stretcher and a medical bag. And he produced a fantastic model which fitted a niche which wasn't on the market. I was really happy with it because that's exactly what I wanted for a particular scenario I had in mind. And that was how our range of models originally started, just a one-off that Phil created for me.
Well, okay, so the choice to go moderns was simply because it was a model that you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of tiny terrain models is, we're not a huge commercial enterprise. We're never going to get rich out of making 28 mil models. So quite frankly, I get built whatever I want and whatever I think other people might want to play their games. I'd been playing some 28 mil modern games, and I'd looked around and I couldn't find a medic that I liked, a Special Forces medic with a guy on a stretcher. And I thought, well, let's get that made. And that's simply why we went down the route of 28 mil Special Forces to start with.
Cool. Okay. Quick aside, what rules are you playing?
So over the years, I've played many, but mainly at the moment, I play Skirmish Sanging, Spectre, but I've also played Black Ops by Osprey, Force on Force, Ambush Alley. So I've tried lots of different modern ones, but my preferred at the moment is Skirmish Sanging. But yeah, it just depends on what sort of game I'm after. Skirmish Sanging is very good, but it's very detail orientated. If I want something more cinematic, I might play something like Evil Bear War Games or Spectre, for example. Just depends on the mood I'm in.
Cool. Just wondered what flavour of gaming you're doing at the moment. Okay, so Special Forces medic, which is, as you say, lovely figure.
Thank you.
Was it always the intention to make that generally available, or was it a case of, well, actually, it's more of a case of it's one I want, and then other people said, oh, can I have one?
A bit of both. Originally, it was just for me. Some people saw it and liked it and said, oh, where did you get that? But also, I've got to be honest, there was a sense of pride coming into it. I'd got this thing commissioned, which is a wonderful feeling. If you've seen a picture of something you like, the original idea for the medic came from a photograph I saw online. To get that image turned into your own miniature, something that you've managed to get done, even if you haven't created it yourself, it's quite a nice thing then to be able to say to people, yeah, you can get hold of this as well. So there was never the intention to create a miniatures company. It's just we did the first one. I thought it was a particularly stunning model. Phil had done a fantastic job, and I wanted to share it with as many people as possible. The other thing is that because I'd originally paid for it with a view of it only being for myself, I kind of took the sculpting costs as a loss leader and thought, well, I was going to pay for them anyway, so it's not like I've got to charge £10 or £15 a pack or anything stupid. Actually, I can let people have these at a sensible price, and that's still what we try to do. Is where possible, we try and absorb the sculpting costs because, quite frankly, I'm getting made what I want, and I'd be paying for it anyway. And then we try and share with everybody, the benefit of the fact that they're now available. And as far as I'm concerned, the more people who have them, the better.
Right. Okay. So you've now produced 5 or 6 packs, haven't you?
Yeah.
So what else have we got available, and can you tell us the story behind why you chose each pack?
Yeah, sure. So within a year, so once I decided that we should make some more miniatures, I set myself a goal of making 8 miniatures in our first year. So we started January last year. As soon as we'd finished the Medic, I started thinking about what should come next, and my mind went to the Raven drone operators. So at the time, and still is, a lot of footage online of guys operating drones, and I thought I'd never seen someone operating a Raven drone. They're normally a 2-man team. I thought that'd be quite a cool model. No one else makes it. I can probably come up with a scenario in Skirmish Sanguine which will use a drone operator. So again, I contacted Phil and said, look, Phil, I want a couple of guys. I want a couple of these Raven drones. Can you do it? And he said, yeah, sure. I hate doing straight line work. I hate making items like drones because they're horribly complicated and you've got to have very straight lines, but I'll give it a crack. And again, within 6 or 8 weeks, he produced a second set of 2 miniatures and 2 Ravens to go on stands. And they were released probably about April time last year, April, May time. It was a nice feeling because we've sold them to all sorts of people, but one guy in particular was a Danish guy who'd actually been a Raven drone operator and saw them online and contacted me via Facebook and said, do you know what? These sculpts are great. They capture the moment. They capture exactly what we used to do. And can I have a couple of packs, one for me and one for my buddy who was also in my team? And that's really nice when you get somebody who you're creating a model that it's meant to represent. When they contact you and say, yeah, do you know what? You've got it right. And could you let your sculptor know you've got it right? And I'd like to pay for that. That's a really nice feeling, even if you're not the one sculpting it yourself.
Yeah.
So that was the drone pack. I then wanted to do some intelligence officers. So I'd seen an image online of a female intelligence officer in Afghanistan. Again, it was nothing more than, well, I want that model. That would be a really cool model that nobody does. I hadn't seen a female intelligence officer. And the other thing I wanted in that pack was a male intelligence officer with some camera kit. So I did some research online and found details of specific bags that they use to carry their equipment. And again, sent all the images over to our sculptor and said, look, Phil, this is what I'm after. And after a couple of trials, he came back and said, well, how do these grab you? And very quickly, we'd got pack 3 done, ready and released. And we learnt quite a big lesson with that release, because the one downside of using internet-based research is if it's a cool picture, you can almost guarantee that another miniatures company have seen the same thing. And we released our model, and within a week, another miniature company released exactly the same model, and they'd obviously used exactly the same internet photo. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. We both had, I like to think we both had very good taste, both picked a good image, and both got the parts sculpted. So that's the way it goes. So from there, I started to think about the more unusual and nichey things that you don't see. Every miniature manufacturer seems to do standard infantrymen, maybe an HMG, maybe a mortar team. But what I'd never seen was guys with laser targeting devices. So your JTAC, your terminal attack controllers. And I found again some nice images in a book, and spoke to my friend Phil and said, look, these 2 guys are special forces. It's got a laser target designator on a little tripod. What can you come up with? Wasn't so easy, that one, because making a tripod so it can be cast is not easy. But we came up with what we needed to, and that was pack 4. And again, it's been a good seller. It's available, and the detail on the sculpt is absolutely lovely. And then the last 2 packs, which we've just released, which are our CIA packs, I wanted to do some more, I won't say police, but something less military.
Yeah.
And the CIA guys, they could also be used as military intelligence. They could be used as FBI. But we've done 2 packs, one of female officers and one of male officers, 2 in each pack. And again, I just literally looked at what was in the market and thought, well, I've not seen female CIA officers or FBI officers. So I gave Phil some ideas of what I wanted, what weapons, what equipment, what clothing and so on. And he designed them and came back with a series of photos and said, this is what I'm coming up with. Are you happy? So it's just been a very kind of, over the last 12 months, a gradual process where we've gone from nothing to now having 12 miniatures designed, 6 packs, and a load more on the bench at the moment being worked on. And plans for this year to go to probably something like 35 or 40 miniatures. So, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's growing very quickly.
Uh-huh. So, how have you found getting into, essentially, starting your own fledgling business?
Do you know what? I was thinking about this when I knew I was coming on today, and I have to say, remarkably easy. I would encourage everybody out there, if they've got a desire to see a model that they've not seen in the market, do you know what? It's not a complicated process. Clearly, I'm not sculpting it. I'm sure there are times when Phil or other sculptors think otherwise. But for me, it's a very simple process. It's not a big cost. To make a pack of miniatures, you're probably talking for a figure in 28mm. Realistically, it's about £125 to get them sculpted. Mm-hmm. Then you're probably talking about moulding and casting of another £100 or so. So for every miniature, you're only talking somewhere around £200, £250. Don't get me wrong, that's a lot of money if you just want one miniature. But if you're looking to grow a range of miniatures, we've released 12 miniatures, so we've probably spent, I don't know, in total, £2,000, £3,000. We've probably got to sell 50 packs to get our money back, which over the course of a life of a product isn't that much. But you see, I have a very pragmatic view on it. I do this because I love it. It's my hobby. Quite frankly, if I took up golf or had a season ticket at Chelsea or something, it would cost me several hundreds of pounds a year anyway. I get an awful lot of enjoyment out of it. And if I can spread that around a bit and encourage other people to have their own range of miniatures, and we all end up with lots of toys that we all love, I'm a happy man. Like I said, I'm in a fortunate position. I have a full-time job. This is something I do as a hobby. I wouldn't want to rely on this as my full income, but as a side project that I can, when I'm feeling a little flush, throw some money at and hopefully make something that people enjoy. I can't think of a better way to spend money, quite frankly.
I was going to say that's quite uplifting. I mean, most people we talk to in our hobby just moan about not making any cash. It's quite nice to hear the other side.
Do you know, I've thought a lot about this, and Phil and I, my sculptor and I, we've chatted endlessly about this. I don't think anyone goes into miniatures to make money. You're never going to get rich on it. But for me, it's more important. It's a bit like the difference between playing a game with a table of terrain that you're kind of half happy with and playing a table of terrain which you absolutely love and you're happy that you've made. I get the same feeling. I can play with a set of miniatures which are okay, and I've got the odd proxy here and there, but it's not really what I want. Or I can spend a little bit extra, have exactly what I want on the table, and I'm happy with it. And I think the one thing I would love to hear is of more people setting up small miniatures company, even if they only ever produce 1 or 2 packs, just to widen the choice out there. And there's not really that many guys making modern miniatures. There's probably 3 or 4 big companies. I say big, relatively big. We're not going to compete with those guys. As much as I'd love to be going toe to toe with, Empress or Spectre or those guys, that's not what we're about. We're about producing models that we hope other people like, who they're prepared to stick their hand in their pocket for a $5 and say, yeah, I'll join in the fun and join in with that. And hopefully from that gives us a bit of spare cash to do the next one and the next one and the next one. We're not here for world domination. We're here just really to produce some nice stuff and have a game of soldiers, quite frankly.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned Empress, because I think they started in a very similar way to you. I think it was the two women who run it. I think their husbands were war gamers.
Yeah.
And they just got fed up with them going off and going to events, so they decided to form their own company and literally did the same thing and have grown it over the years. So it's possible to grow up to quite a, I suppose it depends how much time you got to plow into it. And obviously with you having a full-time job, yours will always sort of get to a certain size, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to take a choice already because, even with just 6-packs, it's remarkable how much time that takes just in terms of promoting it, getting the website sorted, all those kinds of things. My wife works in marketing, so actually she's now stepped in and is joined in as well and is working with me to promote Tiny Terrain models. I'm 44 now. If I can run this for 10 or 15 years, and in 10 or 15 years from now have 50 or 100 packs, and it brings me in a few spare coffers for when I'm retiring, fantastic. And, as I keep saying, into the bargain, I get the toys I want. So don't get me wrong. I'd love tomorrow to release 100 new packs and do everything I want to do. But it's never going to happen. We're going to go just do the things we want to do, release them bit by bit. And as I said, try and share it around a bit. And we're always open to ideas. We'll probably talk about it later, but we've got a Kickstarter we're going to do in May. That came about purely because I saw some sculpts that a guy had done from Russia and fell in love with them. And I thought, do you know what? I can afford it. Why don't we buy all 20 of those sculpts in one hit and just do a Kickstarter? It wasn't planned. It wasn't in the diary as to what we're going to release. But I saw them and thought, what cool miniatures. We've got to have them. Igor Karpov is a Russian sculptor who does a lot of sculpting for Lead Adventure Miniatures and also owns Ratnik as well. He'd been making some Russian Spetsnaz and also some Chechens just really for his own amusement and put them on Facebook and said, this is what I've produced. A couple of people said, oh, they're lovely. Are you going to sell them? And he said, well, no, I'm not really in the business of selling miniatures. I just like making them. And that was the point at which I thought, right, well, if you're not going to sell them, I wonder if I can. And I made contact with him. And yeah, about Christmas time, I bought all 20 of the sculpts and then chatted to him about stretch goals and things. And the plan is 1st of May to run a Kickstarter to release 20 miniatures. So 10 Russians and 10 Chechens, a couple of stretch goals in the form of HMGs and snipers, and possibly, we're working on at the moment, possibly 1 or 2 vehicles to go with it as well. So there's a whole range of Chechen War release you can buy in one hit.
So in that case, with that Chechen War range, you've gone from producing miniatures that nobody else does to, or producing stuff that is different from somebody else does, to actually looking at a range of stuff which is somebody else does a Chechen War range. How do you feel about that?
Do you know what? If I was in it for a purely commercial point of view, I probably wouldn't have touched it with a barge pole, because if I go head to head with one of the bigger miniature companies, it's going to be very difficult for me to compete. But because I'm not doing it purely for commercial reasons, the reason I bought them is plain and simple. I saw the sculpts and thought, wow, they're amazing. And it was probably my heart ruling my head more than anything. But we all suffer from the ooh shiny gene, and that was my ooh shiny moment. And I bought them and then thought, okay, so how am I going to release these? And that's when I then started thinking about Kickstarters, which is something that I'm naturally, I won't say opposed to, but Kickstarter is never something that I've considered before. But for this
You've
particular thing,
been listening to us, haven't you?
do you know, I'm very old-fashioned. I come from, my day job is in the electronics industry. In the electronics industry, if you build something for somebody, the expectation is that you build it and then you sell it. You don't sell it and then have nothing already made and then quickly run back to the factory and say, oh, I've just sold 500,000 of these. We've got to make them now. You make your prototype, you make your product, whatever it is, and then you take that to the market. And this concept of, I've got an idea, can I get someone to fund it? And whilst they're funding it, I'll then work out how the hell I'm going to make it, just doesn't sit well with me. My view is always that miniatures, it may sound old-fashioned, but my view is miniatures should be metal. Miniatures should be available and you see them physically before you buy them. And also that there is a physical master. Even our vehicles were getting made. I see nothing wrong with 3D printing. But I think for miniatures and some vehicles, it's necessary to have a physical master that's been made rather than just 3D sculpting and producing. I don't think we're quite there yet, and I don't want to get into the whole argument again about 3D printing and the merits of it. But Kickstarter.
Oh, really? I mean, you're at the right place to do it.
I know. I've been listening. But no, for me, Kickstarters, there are some things it's very good for. But quite frankly, it's a marketing tool. The reason I'm going to use Kickstarter for this is I have the greens made. The only way I can really get to enough people to sensibly fund getting the product made is through Kickstarter. It kind of goes against the grain with me to do it. But given that I've just been and bought 20 sculpts out of my own pocket, that's the way I'm going to have to do it. But Kickstarter is not the way we will go to market on our, if you like, our standard product, our normal stuff.
Right. Okay. Talking about standard product, you do have something else in the pipeline as well, haven't you? Can you tell us about your Al Narco range, boys?
Yeah. So, I've always quite fancied playing the South American drug wars.
Okay.
Most of my modern games have either centered around the Middle East or North Africa or Central Africa. When I first came up with the idea of doing this, nobody else was really thinking about doing a range of cartel members and DEA agents and that kind of thing. I mentioned it in passing on our Facebook group and a few others, and quite a few people said, oh yeah, like the idea of that. And various conversations started about, well, yeah, you could have DEA agents and you could have FBI and you could have Border Patrol. And I then happened to visit Mexico last September, and I was kind of umming and ahhing whether we should or shouldn't do it. And then I had the pleasure of seeing the Mexican army in all their finery and some of their vehicles. And I thought, actually, yeah, let's do this. So we've already got 4 cartel members. The greens are on my desk. We've got another 8 cartel members that are going to be sculpted in the next 2 to 3 months. We've got 2 vehicles already, which have been made. The masters have been created. And then after that, there'll be 8. I don't know yet whether it will be 2 packs of 4 or 4 packs of 2, but 8, for want of a better word, good guys. So DEA agents, Border Patrol. So you'll end up with about a dozen cartel members and 8 or so police. They're all going to have separate heads as well, so you can mix and match. So hopefully by ringing the changes, you can end up with 2 opposing forces and a couple of vehicles, enough to play a good game, a couple of hours or 3 hours of a skirmish game playing the Mexican drug wars.
I think it sounds like you've been watching Breaking Bad or Sicario too much, mate.
But how'd you guess? But again, when we started this, no one else was thinking of it. And since we've started on this, we now know of at least a couple of other companies that are doing it. My wife actually said to me, aren't you bothered by the fact that 2 other companies are either thinking of doing it or working on it? And I said, you know what? No. The reason I'm doing it is because I wanted those miniatures. If someone else wants to do some miniatures for the same period and the same sort of scenarios, great. That just gives me more toys to play with. So yeah, my view is always, let's all produce what we want, and somewhere along the lines, I'll hopefully sell some, they'll hopefully sell some, and ultimately the market gets bigger and we end up with more toys to play with.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a very philanthropic outlook. All things considered, it's different from what you come across, obviously, with a lot of people. I mean, obviously, as you say, it may be a bit different if you're in this as a full-time business.
Positive and uplifting, I think.
Yeah, well, maybe it's. I mean, I'm of a similar age to you guys. Perhaps as you get older, you just start to realise, I could probably chuck a load of money at this and chase my tail around and get all riled about the fact that one of my competitors are releasing something and I was going to release that, and do you know what? I can't be bothered. I just want to play Toy Soldiers, and I just want everyone to be able to, turn up with, whether it's some of mine, some of Spectre's, Empress's, the Assault Group, whoever. I don't really care what rules we use, as long as people are playing games, are enjoying modelling, enjoying painting, enjoying playing the games themselves, then that for me is good enough. Life's too short.
Now, it's one thing to have the range of miniatures. It's another for the customer to try and get hold of them.
Be nice. Be nice.
I was going to be. Yeah.
That just adds to the exclusivity of them, Neil. Hard to find.
Now, up until now, I mean, you've had a kind of a deal with Evil Bear, and you've also had your Facebook page for Tiny Terrain. But it has to be said, it's a little bit difficult, it seems, to get hold of the models. I mean, I'm assuming it's one of these things of basically people email you and kind of please can I have one of these and one of these and two of those.
Yeah.
Is that kind of the way it's been working up till now?
Yeah, you're right. We made a conscious decision not to have a website when we first started, because originally it was only going to be a pack or two, and there didn't seem a lot of point having a website with just a couple of packs of miniatures on.
No, it does seem fair enough, yeah. Okay.
It was only when I got to about pack 4 or 5 I thought, I need to do something really. I have to say we've used Facebook a lot. As I said, I'm in sales and my wife's in marketing, and we've used Facebook to drive everything. And we've only focused on Facebook within the last 6 months. And within 6 months, we've gone from nothing to about, I think we're up to just short of 800 followers.
Cool.
And what's amazed me is the spread of people. We've had people contact us from the US, from the Nordic countries, from Spain, from all over. And it's now we're at the point where we've got 6 packs, and we've got a website which will be up and running within the next week or two. And you'll be able to order online and use PayPal and all those sorts of things. But up until now, it's really been word of mouth. And it's amazing how many you can sell just really using the power of Facebook and Twitter, and one person linking to another and saying, "Oh, have you seen these?" But we have got to the point now where we need to do something a bit more, and the website will be up and running within a week, and it will be very straightforward: tinyterrainmodels.co.uk.
And a link will be in the show notes. Good stuff. As I say, obviously with some things, with what you've got planned for this year, you're going to need something a little bit more like that, because as I say, otherwise things are likely to get out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, we're as I said, we've got 12 miniatures at the moment. If I look at what we've got planned for this year, we'll be up to another 45 28mm miniatures. So that will put us in the realms of, late 50s, 57, something like that, plus the other bits and pieces. So yeah, we're going to be very quickly with vehicles and other things. We're going to be at the point where we couldn't do it without a website. So that's why we've kind of made the leap.
And then lo and behold, your little part-time hobby, doing a couple of packs of miniatures because you liked it, has suddenly turned into something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Because, quite frankly, what a wonderful position to be in. If I get to the point where I'm too busy to do it because I've got a full-time job and there's enough interest, then we'll scratch our heads and we'll find a way. But, we've only been going for less than 12 months. We've got half a dozen packs out at the moment. Who knows? We might get there within another 12 months. It might take us 5 years. It might take us 10 years. But if we get there, we'll worry about that when we get there.
And there's no thoughts to going back to, I know, once you've got the website, suddenly going, oh, I know, I'll make some terrain and just put that on as a separate bit.
I mean, I still make a lot of terrain for myself. I do occasionally get the pang and think, maybe I could. Of recent, I've been selling some 6mm 3D printed terrain because amongst the many other games I play is modern 6mm. And I've got a 3D printer, and I'd knocked up some, Nissan huts and some radar dishes and factories and those kinds of things. And a few guys on the Facebook page said, "Oh, like them, can you do me some?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So I've been doing a few bits of 3D printed 6mm terrain. That'll probably continue, and they'll probably go on the website as well. But to be honest, that's a low impact thing. Once you've designed the model, if someone wants 20 factories, you just load up the bed with 20 factories and press go, and then go and do your day job, and you come back at the end of the day and it's done.
Screw up in the meantime.
Well, yeah, there is that.
Yeah.
But
go on. I've got a geek. What have you got, printer wise?
Oh, what have I got? I honestly can't tell you off the top of my head. It was on Amazon. I saw it and thought, oh, I've always wanted a 3D printer, and I bought it.
So it's one of these nice little enclosed desktop. You don't have to be able. So Da Vinci or something like that. Then
I plugged it. I plugged it in. I loaded it up, and when I want it, I just press go, and it's great.
It's the future.
And I think you're right. I think it is the future, but we're not quite there yet. There are some things I've tried printing, and I think,
maybe not
quite what I was after. But yeah, I think for things like buildings, for things like lumps of terrain, silly things like I wanted to make some bases to put some trees on. In the old days, I would have been messing around cutting plywood and getting the sander out and all the rest of it. And I just went into my 3D package, measured a couple of blobs, and hit print, and off they went. And 25 minutes later, I had some.
Long as they don't curl up at the edges, you're sorted.
Yeah, exactly. So for things like that, it's great. And also, I also use it a lot for detailing on things. So if I'm making buildings out of foam core, for example, I'll make things like window frames and print them, because it's just easier and quicker than fiddling around with matchsticks and lumps of balsa.
I think there's quite a potential for what you might call hybrid construction on that kind of form, isn't there?
Yeah. I think I'm not a fan. I used to have quite a lot of the laser cut MDF buildings in 15mm. The trouble with that was everyone ended up with a table that looked the same or similar.
I think we've had this complaint.
Yeah, we have had this conversation on several occasions. Yes.
So I think anything you can do to turn your terrain into something a little more bespoke, the better. And if that involves printing some pillars or some windows or some shutters or something,
drain pipes.
Yeah, drain pipes.
I mean, when did you last see an MDF building with drain pipes?
Very true. Yeah, I don't think I ever have. So silly things. I mean, I've got a 28mm Sarissa precision factory that I use for my moderns. So I 3D printed some bulkhead lights, some CCTV cameras and other bits and pieces just to dress it up and to make it look different from everybody else's. And I think that's the way forward, is take the kind of traditional terrain building skills of using foam core and cereal boxes and those things and dress them up with 3D printed artifacts, for want of a better word, to make them look something special.
As you say, it's up until this point, it's been foam core and cardboard. Then we've had the kind of MDF and coffee stirrer revolution sort of thing. It's almost like the next step, isn't it? It's like, okay, whereas, like for example, looking around to do dressings for the buildings we're creating at the moment, or have created, and I'm looking at making some stuff up, and you're hunting around the various manufacturers looking for stupid things like wheelbarrows and ladders, and then chatting with people and finding out that no, they don't want to make you a greenhouse in 15mm because it's just far too fiddly. But it's that sort of thing, and those sort of little bits and pieces that bring terrain to life. They're the bits that make the difference. And if you can produce all those, simply by, having a bit of a fiddle around, or finding somebody else who may have already done the fiddling around for you, and be able to print them out in an hour, or half an hour, or however long. It's a winner, isn't it?
We should
Absolutely.
talk.
And you're right. For me, with any table, it's a bit like when you paint a miniature. A painted miniature looks great. It normally looks much better when you've based it and done the basing. The basing normally acts as the frame, and it's a bit the same with terrain. You make a table as good as you can, and it looks good, but it really comes to life when you start putting dustbins and benches and old bicycles and all the kind of things that the guys who do railway modelling do. Just take it to the level. I found that with my 28mm Middle Eastern table I made. I started off by following a very strict plan of what was going to go where, finished it and looked at it and thought, it's all well and good, but it doesn't look very realistic. It looks a bit clinical. And it wasn't until I started putting the odd dustbin in and piles of rubbish and some old bicycles and those sorts of things that suddenly it comes to life. A few lampposts, telegraph poles, those things. And that's all the stuff you can 3D print. They're all on Thingiverse, most of them downloadable for free, and you can dress your table very quickly and turn it into something quite nice with almost no cost.
Oh, dear. Yes, I thought of something else I might want to put on my shopping list. Anyway, moving quickly on.
The trouble is, and Mike will probably appreciate this, the trouble is once you get one, if you then start making some bits and people want to either buy them off of you or you're making them for friends, you think, I could really do it with a second 3D printer. And then you think, in fact, if I had 2 or 3 of them, I could just keep them running all the time, and I could have one for my stuff and one for customers. But it's a slippery slope.
I'm looking here, and if I move the filament onto that bit of shelf, there's space, I think, for 3. And I could clear the shelf above, and there's space for 3 more.
Oh, it sounds so familiar.
3D printing, it's a future retirement fund.
Particularly since Roblox have just announced a way of networking your printers together, so you can split up a big job between 5 or 6 printers and then glue it together afterwards.
Dangerous ground.
It really is, isn't it?
But having said all of that, 3D printing is great. But for me, at the moment, 28mm miniatures and smaller, as I said at the outset, for me, there's nothing beats getting someone who can actually sculpt a physical green, seeing the green, sending that off to, in my case, Leon at Pendragon to do the moulding and the casting, and that feeling when you get the box back with 50 or 100 little metal men in, and you look at it and you think, wow, that's been created from one guy looking at a photograph and making that with his bare hands. No computers, no software, just proper artisan skill. And I will always sing to the praises of Phil Lewis, our main sculptor for all our main lines, and Igor Karpov, our guy who's done our Russian and Chechens. For me, they are true artists, and for me, nothing will beat. You're never going to get a 3D printed product which is going to beat someone who's sat there and crafted it and produced it for 28mm at the moment. It may change in a few years, but at the moment, nothing can beat it.
But that said, given that your guy has said he has problems with straight lines, 3D printing vehicles is definitely getting there.
Yeah, it is. And in fact, I've done a couple of test pieces because there were some models I wanted or I was considering for the Kickstarter, and I wasn't sure whether 3D might be the way to go. I've decided for now it's not the way to go, and I've actually got another guy who is making our vehicles for us in physical models as opposed to 3D. But yeah, I think, as I said, not there yet for me, but give it another maybe 2 or 3 years or so. I think we're getting very close.
Yeah, it was interesting chatting to Andy Cooper from Westmont a couple of weeks ago when they were talking about the Panzermech Kickstarter that he'd done, and with the fact that that was the first time they'd gone 3D.
Yeah,
and the fact that the difference in speed between the 3D sculptor that they'd found and him having like the amount of time it took him to produce the the Tiger Mech for Six of the Third Reich, for example.
Yeah.
That was interesting. So yeah, as you say, we're kind of getting there for some, but maybe not quite for others at the moment.
Having said all of that, a friend of mine a few weeks ago said to me, "Do you fancy a game of Blitzkrieg Commander on Saturday in 10 mil?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." And he said, "What are you going to play?" I said, "Oh, I've got some British. I'll bring them along." I got them out and suddenly realised I hadn't got a British command unit. So what did I do? I went on to Thingiverse. I printed out a Morris radio truck. It printed in about 40 minutes flat. I painted it green and stuck it on a base. And by Saturday morning, I'd got a full army. So, the old days, you wouldn't have been able to do that. It would have been a case of, I don't have a full army. I'm going to have to order one from the net or go to the shop and go through all that rigmarole. I just downloaded one, printed it, painted it, and that was it.
Yeah. It's an interesting world in which we are currently existing where, people are saying, it's a golden age for war games, talking about the number of miniatures and the number of rules available. But as you say, we're right on the cusp of, and this is something we've been talking about for a while now, especially on this show. We are entering into that new ground, aren't we? We're entering into what is potentially a complete revolution, in the way the hobby works.
Yeah, there was a big shift a few years ago when there were people like Plastic Soldier companies started producing or producing again plastic soldiers. There'd been the whole wave of Airfix when I was a kid in the 20 mil scale, but when Plastic Soldier companies started doing plastic, that was one wave, and now it seems like there's another wave, which is 3D printing, and I just don't know how close, whether it's 1 year, 5 years, 10 years away before it really is a case of you download your army off the net, you print your army, you paint your army. I don't know how close we are to that, but I think it's coming.
And I noticed our other normal 3D print enthusiast has been remarkably silent throughout all this. You still there, Mr. Luff?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Been very restrained, mate.
No. Well, I'm not an owner of a 3D printer, so I'm still waiting for the full revolution. I am.
One last thing I'd like to ask you about, Craig. Tiny Terrain TV.
Yeah.
I noticed that that this year a couple of videos have appeared on a YouTube channel. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I used to run a blog, which was just a blog like any other blog, which, I used to put a few terrain tutorials on and a few bits and pieces. And the company I had my blog with went bust overnight, and I lost my entire blog. And I thought, that's probably 3 or 4 years worth of stuff, which isn't backed up anywhere, and I've lost the lot. So I was thinking about a way of, in particular, doing terrain tutorials. And I thought, well, it's relatively easy these days to take some photographs whilst you're making something, stitch them together, put a bit of audio and some effects around it, and make a video. So I thought, well, let's give it a whirl. So I did one which was on how to make 28mm containers for modern or type settings. And yeah, incredibly, I finished it. I think it was on the Friday night. I put it onto Facebook and put a couple of little promos about it. And by Saturday lunchtime, the Facebook had 11,000 hits. And I thought, wow. I went and spoke to my wife, who is, as far as I'm concerned, the marketing guru of the operation, and said, this happened. And she said, well, yeah, of course, it's video content. Video content is king. Do anything on video pretty much, and it's going to go mental. So by the end of that week, we got something like about 25,000 hits on this 2-minute video that, quite frankly, I did in my lunch break. So I thought, well, let's do another one. And I did another one, which was a painting guide on some near future models. And pretty much the same thing happened again. I think we had about 20,000 hits. And that's how we've been growing the Facebook group, by just putting up some video content, trying to give something back to people, showing how we paint a model, or how I paint a model. And we'll continue to do that. It's not an overly complicated process. It takes a bit of fiddling around because you've got to have, decent lighting and a decent camera. But yeah, whenever I'm making something new now, my intention is to photograph or video it, and to try and make another video which will just put up, it hopefully gives some people some ideas about what they could do and how they could approach making a piece of terrain or painting something. So there's no intention to do anything daft like make it subscription or only give it to certain people. We just pump it out into the ether, and if people pick it up and love it and like it, great. And if they don't, well, fine. It's their choice. Yeah, we'll just carry on making them, and hopefully people will use them and like them.
Good stuff. Again, we'll put a link to that in the show notes. But so more to come, yeah?
Oh, absolutely. We've only been doing, I think, 3 months. I think ago we started the first one, something like that. So we've only got a couple up, but there'll be another half a dozen, I would think, over the next year. It just depends on what I'm building at any given time. At the moment, I'm not building a lot of terrain. I'm painting a lot of terrain. But yeah, there's going to be probably another round of terrain building. I'm either painting or terrain building because otherwise, if I try doing both, I get in a real muddle. So at the moment, I'm painting. Probably in a month or so, I'll be terrain building again, and we'll be making some stuff specifically for the El Narco range. So some South American buildings and stuff. So we'll certainly film that and show people how we make our buildings.
Oh, cool. Good stuff. Well, Craig, it's been fab to talk. Thanks for coming on the show.
No, thanks for having me. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and it's been great to find out everything that's been going on with Tiny Terrain. As I say, really exciting time. So I'm looking forward to the stuff that you're producing this year. As I say, it sounds like it's just on the cusp of taking off.
Yeah, I just hope we can keep up with the demand, because we've been very lucky. Everything we've produced so far, people have jumped on. So to everybody who's bought some of our product, thank you. For everyone who's joined the Facebook group, thank you. And we'll just do what we do, and hopefully people will like it. Brilliant stuff.
Well, so we look forward to seeing the El Narco and the new Chechen range. We'll definitely make sure that links are on the website so people can find out where you're going. And I, for one, will wait with bated breath for your terrain making videos, and we will definitely have to have you back on to talk about terrain. That would be good fun.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Brilliant stuff. Well, all the very best, mate.
Thanks,
Take
Neil.
care, and we'll speak to you soon.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Cheers.
Cheers. Okay, here's a chance for one of you guys to win some models. We have the current full range of Tiny Terrain models available to give to you. Okay, so that's 6 packs. All you have to do is answer the following question. During the interview, Craig talks about the first set of rules he ever bought. Can you please tell me what that was? All you have to do is send that on an email. Entitle the email Tiny Terrain Models Competition. Send it to competition@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you'll be entered into a prize draw for that set of 6 packs of miniatures. Okay, so closing date. You have until the 28th of March to get those entries into me. That's the 28th of March. And the winner will be announced on the show that will be published on the 1st of April. I promise you it won't be an April Fool. So, good luck, and look forward to hearing from you. This is a message from The Cranky Lawyer. Huzzah! Please plan to join us for 3 great days of the best our hobby has to offer. Beautiful tabletops, challenging scenarios, board games, a wonderful variety of gaming-related shopping, and great company. Huzzah! May 19th to the 21st, 2017, South Portland, Maine. Miniatures games, board games, tournaments, vendors, raffle and great company. Join us for 3 days of fun. If you want to learn more about shoutouts, visit our Patreon page. The link is on the website. We always love to hear from you, our listeners. You can contact us in a couple of ways. You can do that via email at mailbag@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk, or you can now leave a voicemail message for us. The number to call is 0116 318 4114. Please note, call charges may apply. So then, guys, what do you think? For somebody who isn't doing this as a business, is only doing this as a hobby, I don't know. Sounds like it's starting to kind of get away from him. Get away from him a little bit. I was thinking it's like, I mean, as he said, it's all very well having half a dozen models, but we're sort of going,
I'll just buy this range.
Mm.
And then we're making this other range, and it's like turning into a full-time job.
There, but for the grace of God, go all of us, I suspect.
I was thinking of Minden Miniatures when Craig was talking. Because he started off just by getting a few figures sculpted for himself because he wanted them, and decided to sell them, give him a bit of money to get some more figures done, and then he ended up with this huge, great Napoleonic and 7 Years' Wars range, didn't he?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Was it Minden Miniatures?
I suspect it's probably true of more than one figure manufacturer.
Yeah, one guy in his house just wanted to basically fund an army for himself. Fantastic.
Yes.
Where do you suppose Bill Thornhill started then?
Bill wanted to have a model company. He started off purposely. He gave it work as a postie and started his own model company because he learned how to sculpt. He went to work for Foundry and learned how to mould. He bought all the stuff, and then got some mate of his to design him a website. But yeah, that was always...
Anybody I know?
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, but even so, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, particularly anybody out there who is, but I suspect that you start out, whatever you're doing, you start out by having each you want to scratch.
Yeah, I think that is true. I mean, Bill was very clever. He sort of sat down and went, right, I want to do this army because I know it's going to sell well. And that was the whole drive of it.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, well, he's obviously an exception then. But yes, cool. They're an interestingly niche set of figures, those as well, aren't they?
They're a bit of an eclectic set, aren't they? And so, I suppose that's the thing. It's a case of it's all the bits that nobody else kind of does that much of.
Yeah, I must admit, I'd hate to be in a position where I decided to get figures sculpted for whatever I'm into that week. Because that would be a really, really eclectic range.
For you, Hobbsy, that could be scary.
Yeah.
Isn't that what you do normally?
I don't get figures sculpted, but I do swap around an awful lot with what I'm painting and playing with. Just imagine taking this to that next level where you think, I'm just doing this, so I'm going to get a couple of figures sculpted and I'll put them for sale. And then a couple of weeks later, I'm playing this now. I'm going to get a few figures sculpted and put up for sale.
Yeah. I'm fair play to the guy. Is just to do what he did that. Just get more toys to play with.
Yeah,
brilliant. So yeah, lovely chat, and hopefully we'll get him back for to talk terrain. So that'll be good if you get to that. But no, really interesting, and a bit of a different take on the hobby from what we've heard before from other places. Cool. Well, is that about it for this show then, chaps?
Oh, I think so.
Oh, I can't think of anything else unless anybody's invested in any Kickstarters they haven't mentioned.
Not this week, Your Honour.
No, I was noting somebody stuck a little post on the Meeples Facebook group, the Black Scorpion Tombstone range.
I was avoiding that one.
Any particular reason?
For the fact that, other than the fact that Black Scorpion do some really nice figures.
That may have quite a lot to do with it. And the fact that somebody was muttering about a Wild West campaign later in the year at the club. Yeah.
Is Black Scorpion the company who did Cutlass?
Yes.
Yes.
They certainly are.
Mm,
You say.
Arr.
Yes.
indeed. So, yes, that looks interesting. Saw a couple of interesting, actually saw two interesting Kickstarters, which, yes, I have been accused of drive-bys in the fact of, well, in fact, it was yesterday. I saw that and thought, oh, that looks really nice. Oh, Mr. Hitman's into anime. You can have a look at that. and whilst we were
That's
discussing,
evil.
Relic Knight 2nd edition is just being done and has some nice models in it, and they're now redoing it all in resin, which is interesting. And obviously, it's very, very anime, but has got some very nice models in it, and they're doing a two-player starter set, which looks nice. So, yeah, that was one thing. And the other thing is, I think it featured on Beasts of War last week. I just caught it. All I did was catch the title, and then Rich Halford at work talked about it today, and we had a look at it, and we kind of went, oh. If you're on Kickstarter, search for something that says GKR. Okay.
I'm going to regret this, aren't I?
GKR stands for Giant Killer Robots.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The main company behind it is none other than Weta Workshop.
Oh! Oh, yes, I heard about this. Oh, so it is.
Yes.
Funded in 4.5 hours.
And you look at the three funding levels. There's, I think it's $99, $125, and $150. And what you get for that price, you're kind of thinking, you know what? That ain't bad. That isn't bad at all. It's basically a giant robot arena model game. Yeah, so so when it says giant killer robots, it's doing exactly what it says on the tin. But it was just really interesting, and the fact that it was one of the guys had to be Weta Workshop of all people. So I'm busy.
Well, let's face it, if they haven't got model building skills, nobody has.
Yes. So I'm busy avoiding that, but I may be killed by either Mr. Halford or Mr. Hickman before too long, because they're both looking at me, kind of going, "Curse you, curse you." I'm running away very fast.
Not entirely my cup of tea, but I can see how it would appeal.
This is it. I mean, certainly I think the Giant Stompy Robots appeals a little bit more than Giant Killer Robots appeals a little bit more. Although the Relic Knight stuff is really nice, although not cheap. I mean, it's half price on the Kickstarter, but you look at, I mean, it is lovely, but of course, when you think full detail resin models, they're going to be nice, but yeah. And on that note, I think it's time that we ran away for the evening. So all that's left to say is thank you for joining us, Mr. Whitaker. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nice to meet. And thank you once again to Mr. Hobbs for sharing part of his National Day of celebration with us.
You're welcome. I have to go out now. We have to set fire to a straw man.
And then ride the dragon home, is that right?
And dance around the mountains naked.
Whilst waving leeks, is that right?
Indeed.
Mental image I didn't need.
Normally it's just me who does that, but you know.
Well, there we go. And on that note, thank you for listening, one and all. Hope you've enjoyed it. Take care of yourselves, happy gaming, and we will speak to you next week.
Good luck with the dice rolls.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Meeples and Miniatures podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, why not share it with others by leaving us a review on iTunes? And if you have any comments or questions, you can always email the show. The address is info@meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. And you can also visit our webpage, where you'll find a complete episode archive, all the View from the Veranda podcasts, rules reviews, and our blog of hobby items and news, which is updated several times a week. This is also where you'll find the links to our presence on social media, and here you can follow us on Twitter or join our Facebook group. And finally, here you can also find details should you wish to support us by making a donation to the podcast. All this on the Meeples and Miniatures website, www.meeplesandminiatures.co.uk. The Meeples and Miniatures podcast is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 3.0 Unported license. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.